From Hollywood, it's time now for Edmund O'Brien as...
Johnny Dollar.
Lieutenant Anderson, Dollar. You can come down any time you want to. I'm still at the hospital.
Thanks, Lieutenant. How's the driver?
He's not going to live either. The doctors doubt they can bring him around for a statement.
Oh? What about the loss? Has the amount been figured out yet?
Pretty close, almost $250,000.
I don't suppose there's a chance, but was any of it marked or listed by serial number?
Very little of it. You'd better come down. If the driver does regain consciousness, we may get something. If he doesn't, we'll be starting pretty much in the dark.
I guess both of us have done that before. All right, Lieutenant Anderson. I'll be right down.
Edmund O'Brien in another adventure of the man with the action-packed expense account, America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Expense account submitted by Special Investigator Johnny Dollar to Home Office, Columbia All Risk Insurance Company, Hartford, Connecticut. The following is an accounting of expenditures during my investigation of the month-end raid matter. Expense account item 1, $108.25 airfare and incidentals between Hartford and Kansas City, Missouri, where I arrived some 7 hours after the company had advised me of the loss sustained by armed robbery by the Andover chain of department stores. The first details I received were sketchy. At the finish of a 4-day month-end sale, the armored truck that had picked up the receipts from 3 branch stores had been robbed. 1 guard had been killed at the scene. The driver, Carl Biller, was dying at 11:30 that night when I met Lieutenant Arneson in the hospital corridor.
Dr. Surrey, report.
I'm afraid I talked you into a wasted trip down here. Just saw the doc again. They're giving Biller less than an hour to live now. His wife just went into the room.
Never came back at all, huh?
No, I've been with him most of the time and had a man there when I wasn't.
What did you expect him to give you, Lieutenant?
I'm not sure. According to witnesses, he and the guard were shot down by one of the men in cold blood. Not because they resisted the killers. Why? To eliminate them, maybe. Why? Because the victims knew the killer, maybe, in spite of the masks they were wearing. That's what I hope you tell me.
That's the point.
Report.
How about these witnesses? They any good?
Good as most. The picture seems to have been 2 cars, both sedans. One of them was in the passenger loading zone when the armored truck arrived and parked in front of it.
These men knew when and where, then.
They sure did. They knew the truck had picked up the receipts at the Andover stores in Kansas City, Kansas, and Independence, and the 1 car was waiting for them at the store here. The other car double parked when the money came out. The men were shot down, and the truck was empty before anybody turned in an alarm.
How about license numbers?
Both on the stolen car list.
Report.
You can work any way you want, Dollar.
11.
I won't get in your road.
Thanks, Lieutenant.
We're both aiming for the same thing, and I'm going to have my hands full. Robbery detail tells me their informers have hinted that a gang has been forming here in town for the last month or 2.
I guess they were right.
We're pulling in everybody we can. Maybe we can get some talk out of some of them. It'll be a slow process, but that's the way we work. I'll be in my... Oh, yes, Cole. Is he gone?
There was nothing they could do.
Well, that finishes that. This is Mr. Dollar, Sergeant Cole.
All right.
Sergeant Cole?
Dollar's investigating for the insurance company.
Yeah, but they're hurting, huh?
I've seen them in better moods. Were you planning on talking to the widow tonight, Lieutenant? Follow up the possibility that he knew the killers?
What kind of condition is she in, Cole?
Hard to tell. She seemed to be standing up all right.
I'd just as soon leave it to you tonight, Dollar. Cole and I want to get back to headquarters and see what we've pulled in.
Sure, Lieutenant. Anything you say. A short time later, a white-sheeted figure was rolled out of the Biller room, followed in a couple of minutes by Mrs. Biller, a plain, lumpy woman in her 40s. In silence, she followed me into an empty waiting room a few yards down the corridor.
I want to go home. I've been here all day and I'm tired.
I can certainly understand that, Mrs. Biller, and I won't keep you long. This may seem like a strange question under the circumstances, but do you think there could have been anything personal connected with your husband's death?
Personal?
We're looking for a valid reason for Mr. Biller and the other men being shot down the way they were.
What are you talking about? Why wouldn't he get shot? It didn't surprise me. He was always with a lot of money, and I told him he'd get shot someday.
There was no apparent reason, Mrs. Biller. They weren't given time to try to protect the money. They didn't draw their guns. Private guards work under orders to surrender as a rule, but they weren't given a chance. They were met on the sidewalk and killed without a word.
I haven't been thinking about anything like that all day long. He'd been wondering what would happen if he died. Now he has. And here I am with the house still not paid for and no money. I just have to face it. He's dead, and that's all there is to it.
You'd want to help us find the man who killed him if you could, wouldn't you?
How could I help you do that?
He and the other man could have been killed because they knew the man who killed them.
How could anything like that be? Why should Carl know anybody like that?
We don't know that he did. We only wonder.
And I read the papers. How could he know anybody when they were all wearing masks?
That could mean that he knew them very well. Well enough to recognize them in spite of the masks. Don't you see what I mean, Mrs. Biller?
I can't think. You couldn't expect me to think after a day like this has been. I don't know what to say. I'm all mixed up now.
I understand, Mrs. Biller. I won't bother you any more tonight. What we want to know is if somebody who knew your husband and knew quite a lot about his job could have been responsible for his death and the robbery. We'll talk to you about it again. Maybe tomorrow. Lieutenant Arneson thought enough of the interview and the widow's reaction to assign a couple of men to keep her covered. The police spent most of that night pulling in known and suspected criminals and grilling them without any definite success. The next morning, I was in the lieutenant's office while he was waiting for one of his informers to be brought in.
Nothing on the missing cars yet, Dollar, but I'm dead certain they haven't got out of town. We had it sewed up in a hurry. I put another man on the Biller angle, too, looking into his habits and friends, but staying away from his wife. We'll save her for you.
Thanks a lot.
I thought you'd like her.
Here's the count, Lieutenant.
Yeah, come on in, Emil. This is Emil Ordog, sometimes called the Count. Sit down, Emil. Emil and I have known one another for a long time, haven't we, Emil?
I owe the lieutenant a deep debt of gratitude.
We get along. Emil, this man's working for the insurance company that covered the missing money. You can trust him.
If you say so, what else?
What's going on in town, Emil? What does the crowd say about this heist?
They don't say very little. They don't like this. These are foreigners who do this.
From where?
Chicago. The crowd don't like this.
Doesn't look like a foreign job to me.
They knew just where that armored truck would be and were waiting for it. How would outsiders get information like that?
Who are these foreigners and where are they?
Where they are, I don't know. Who? I hear only some names that are nothing. One is Pinky, one other is Ross.
First name or last?
Only Ross. Other is Shorty, other is the Mick. Who their other names are, nobody knows. He's not much, Lieutenant, but I am only a man.
Anything more, Johnny?
Yeah. Do you know if they're still here in Kansas City?
How do I know that? So I, from the crowd, am the only one who knows where they are? Then I am shot, too?
The lieutenant seemed to be fairly sure that the men and the money was still in town. All the escape routes had been covered by police armed with composite descriptions of more than 30 witnesses to the shooting. The information given us by the informer was almost worthless, but the first names and aliases were wired to Chicago for a search. And the officer working on the Biller angle came up with a development later that same afternoon. So I was armed with at least something definite when I went out to see the widow. Hello, Mrs. Biller.
Hello.
Hope you're feeling better today.
Some ways I do, some ways I don't. You can come in.
Thank you. Mrs. Biller, I learned some things this afternoon that I hope you've been thinking about.
What?
Your husband and this woman named Betty Clare.
I was going to tell you. What do you know about her?
She's married to a man who just got out of prison.
I was going to tell you. I knew she'd get him into trouble sooner or later. I did all I could to get him away from her. Even wrote a letter to the bonding company that she was nobody to be hanging around somebody with Carl's word.
He saw her after her husband was paroled?
Oh, not so much, I guess. But the husband was away sometimes. I don't know. Guess Carl went to see her some then.
You must have thought of her when I talked to you last night.
I did. There's no use lying.
Why didn't you mention her?
I don't know. Maybe I was ashamed of having a husband some other woman could keep a hold on until she got him killed.
And you think their association was one where he would have told her details about his job?
Yes.
Now you'll admit that you think she had something to do with the robbery.
Yes. Because Carl didn't come home night before last. I don't know where he was. But he came here in the morning to change into his uniform, then he left. That was the morning he was killed.
Did you ask him where he'd been?
No. I got over doing that quite a while ago. Has she been arrested?
Not yet. Lieutenant Arneson is waiting for me. We wanted to get what you had to say before we talked to her. Do you have anything more?
No. Except I hope she gets hurt as much as she's made me get hurt.
I think that's all then, Mrs. Biller. Sorry you didn't mention this last night. Hope we aren't too late now. There's nobody here.
You're in there. Open up. Spring lock.
Huh? You've got the key.
Let's get over to the side. You never know.
I guess we're safe.
Betty Clare. She's been choked to death.
We will return you to the second act of yours truly, Johnny Dollar, in just a moment. There's lots of good folding money and an hour of merriment and music on hand again tonight when CBS presents Sing It Again. The Phantom Voice brings an extra tingle of excitement and pays off handsomely when Jan Murray uses that coast-to-coast phone. Here's Sing It Again on CBS tonight. Now, with our star, Edmund O'Brien, we return you to the second act of yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Betty Clare had been strangled, obviously by a pair of hands. The apartment showed signs of a struggle, but further search revealed only a newspaper whose date and time seemed to indicate that she'd been killed after Carl Biller had died. There wasn't a lead as to the possible whereabouts of her husband, Arnold Clare, but the search for him was speeded up. At 5, a report from a section of Kansas City called East Bottom did give us a lead. The body of a man was found in a garage. He'd been shot to death, and in his pocket was a receipt for an insured parcel post package. A follow-up on the receiver's address showed the package to contain $15,000 in cash. Later, the informer, Emil Ordoff, followed the lieutenant and me in to view the body.
Okay, Charlie. You know this man, Emil?
How could I be sure?
He's one of the crowd. I know who he is. Do you?
His name is Norwood?
You know it is.
Yes, I know.
They'll know it. The record of narcotics possession, suspicion of burglary, 60 days last year, and vagrancy and carrying a concealed weapon.
Yes, Earl Norwood.
The lieutenant tells me he's not from Chicago, Emil, that he's a local boy.
Yes.
You still say the Andover job was pulled by Chicago men?
This is what I think, what the talk is.
I also told Dollar that I never could really trust you, Emil. There was always a chance somebody might buy you into bringing me false information.
Oh, no.
Couldn't somebody who just made a $200,000 haul buy you into it, Emil?
Oh, no.
Money's not going to do you any good if I find out you aren't leveling with me. I got about 4 charges I can bring against you. They send you up for quite a while.
I owe you deep gratitude. I tried to find out more, so you let me go now.
I'll give you the rest of the evening up to 10:30, Emil. One thing you don't have to find out. Norwood here sent 15 grand out of the city by mail. There's only one reason he'd do that. He was mixed up with the Andover job. Now get going. I'll pick you up later.
The 2 additional killings, possibly linked to the robbery, set Kansas City's underworld and police force spinning. Every officer in town was put on duty until further notice. By 8, the tanks were filled with hoodlums, while the streets and hangouts were strangely empty and silent. At 9 o'clock, it seemed that things started to break. A known associate of Arnold Clare was picked up and brought to the lieutenant's office.
Sure I know Arnold. I was in prison with him. I met his wife the other night, but I don't know anything about the Andover job.
Where were you the morning it was pulled?
Listen, I got alibis to prove I wasn't mixed up in nothing.
What about Arnold Clare?
As far as I know, he was going straight. That's what he told me, anyway.
We've got Clare linked up pretty close. We know his wife was running around with the driver of that armored truck. That would give Clare access to the information he'd need.
Yeah, well, I can't help what his wife was up to. He told me he was going straight. Said he was looking for a job.
When did he say that?
Last time I saw him, the other night when I met his wife. Tuesday it was.
Tuesday night?
Yeah.
Robbery came off Wednesday morning. And you were with Clare and his wife Tuesday night.
That's right. I tell you, I don't think he had nothing to do with it.
How late were you with him?
Oh, must have been 1:30, 2 in the morning.
And Betty Clare was there all the time?
That's right.
Doesn't jive with Mrs. Biller's story, Lieutenant.
Look, I'm telling the truth. I got no reason to lie.
How about proof? Was anyone else there?
Yeah, somebody else was there. We ordered some liquor sometime around midnight. The boy from the liquor store brought it up. I forgot the name of the place, but I can show you.
Mrs. Biller said her husband was with Betty Clare the night before the robbery.
That ain't true. Nobody was with her but Arnold and me. I'll take you to that liquor store.
And she was killed yesterday, the day after Biller died.
What? Who was killed?
Are you sure Biller wasn't with you and Betty Clare and her husband?
You telling me Betty Clare is dead?
You know she is.
Strangled. Now tell us why.
Hey, wait a minute. I didn't know anything about it. I swear I didn't. I'll tell you where Arnold is to prove I didn't know.
What kind of proof is that?
I didn't know. I swear I didn't. He didn't tell me. He said there was too much heat on from the Andover job. And he didn't have an alibi for the whole morning. He said he wanted to stay out of sight for a while.
Sure.
Make himself look innocent, I suppose.
I don't care what you think. That's what he told me, and that's all. But if his wife has been killed, I don't want to have nothing more to do with him. That's a real double cross to get me mixed up in anything like that. I'm through with him.
Where is he?
There's a shack out by the edge of town near the river. I've been taking food to him.
Let's get started.
Lieutenant means you, Stone.
Now, look, you ain't gonna make me go with you. Ain't it enough I tell you where he is?
You're the first real live hunk of progress we've had. We want to hang on to you. Come on.
He'll kill me if he gets a chance.
We'll try and see that he doesn't get one.
Lieutenant,
Yes, Cole.
bad news. They caught up with Emil Ordoff.
He's dead?
Yeah, the report just came in.
Well, that's too bad. He was a good, honest steward, and I'm going to miss him.
Is it better stop, don't you think?
The town is really hot. I can't remember it ever being this hot.
We checked Stone's story at the liquor store. The delivery boy finally remembered and agreed that only Stone had been with the Clares in the apartment the night before the robbery. "20 minutes later, with headlights out, our car pulled up on a dirt road. The shack Stone pointed out was screened by a stand of willows on the riverbank. One small window showed some light from inside.
Wait a minute. I ain't going in there. You can't make me.
Come on.
He'll kill me.
No, he won't, Stone.
Let's go.
I tell you, he'll kill me.
It's my case. I'll take it. Stay where you are, Claire.
Who you? Stone.
Stay in the chair. Lieutenant Arneson, homicide.
Stone. You sold me out.
Don't try it, Claire.
You lied to me, Arnold. You lied to me. You didn't tell me about your wife. And you was getting me mixed up in a killing. Well, that don't set with me.
And I called you my friend.
Settle back, Claire. You want to check in for weapons, Jenny?
Sure. Relax, Claire. You can't do yourself any good by making a play. Stand up.
I won't make a play. There's a .38 in my left coat pocket.
You can sit down now. Where do you want to start, Claire?
I guess it don't make much difference, does it?
Why'd you kill your wife?
What makes you so sure all right. I killed her because I was trying to go straight this time. And she got mixed up in this Andover job. If I'd known about it before, I'd stopped it for sure, but I didn't find out until after it happened.
How did you find out?
One of the guys that got killed, the driver, Biller, his wife got me on the phone the night he died. She told me about Betty and her husband.
You didn't know about it?
No, I didn't know. This dame told me about it. All the years I was in prison. And after I got out, every chance they had.
That's the only reason you had?
I told you I was trying to go straight. And I found out Betty is working this Biller into setting up a job with her. She was doing it to get rid of me again. She knew the board would take my parole away no matter what I said.
Mrs. Biller told you all this?
Her husband talked about it before he died.
You're a stupid fool.
Sure I am, sure, but I couldn't help it. I went crazy. Betty wasn't at home when I found out. I guess I drank a lot and thought about it. And when she came home, I just grabbed her. I couldn't help it. I knew I was killing. I couldn't stop. You know something? I don't care.
That's the spirit.
What about the Andover job? How much do you know about that?
I know one guy that was in on it, and I'll finger him for you. I'll finger him. I'll see some of them take the same trip I'm taking.
From the break Stone gave us, the case snowballed. The man Claire took us to led us to another, and he to another. It went that way until 4:30, when all that remained were the men from Chicago we'd heard of earlier. They were holed up in a house together, and one of them, Ross Degnan, had been the killer during the job. He'd killed for no reason, except that he'd been under the influence of narcotics. Dawn was just beginning to break when the stakeout was drawn around the house.
Gotta move faster than I wanted to. One of the men who got here before we did says he heard a phone ringing in the house.
They've been tipped, then.
Probably. Sergeant Cole?
Ready to go, Lieutenant?
I think so. You cover me with a Thompson from the driveway, near the porch there.
Yeah.
You aren't forgetting those sawed-off shotguns, are you? Not going to get within range.
Not me. We'll try to call them out from the street. Oh, wait.
Car starting. Where is it? The garage.
They've got into the garage.
The garage! You men in the back! Cover the garage!
Watch it. Here they come.
Thompson, Cole, use it! Get the driver!
It had been a long night, but we saw the end of the trouble there on the street. What the Chicago men had with them and stolen money brought the recovery up to within $2,000 of the original amount. Expense account item 2, $180. Miscellaneous item 3, same as item 1, transportation back to Hartford. Expense account total, $396.50. Remarks? I talked to Mrs. Biller before I left, hoping to get some kind of revenge against the woman who'd stolen her husband. She told Arnold Clare that Betty had set up the robbery, but she got her revenge, murder. And the company owes her a deep debt of gratitude, because when that broke, the whole thing broke. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, stars Edmund O'Brien in the title role and is written by Gil Dodd with music by Wilbur Hatch. Edmund O'Brien's latest picture is a Paramount Pictures production, The Redhead and the Cowboy. Featured in tonight's cast were Herb Butterfield, Joe Duvall, Virginia Gregg, Edgar Barrier, Sidney Miller, and Peter Leeds. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, is produced and directed by Jaime Del Valle. This is Dick Cutting inviting you to join us next week at this time when Edmund O'Brien returns as...
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Do you know that there's one fire in an American home every 20 seconds? That fires kill 11,000 people every year? Staggering, isn't it? 90% of fires in the home start through carelessness. Be careful with matches and keep them out of the reach of children. And if you're a careless smoker, don't smoke in bed or discard lighted cigarettes thoughtlessly. Don't gamble with fire. The odds are against you. Stay tuned now for 5 minutes of the latest news. This is CBS, where our Miss Brooks holds classes every Sunday night, the Columbia Broadcasting System.
time now.
From Hollywood, it's time now for Edmund O'Brien as...
Johnny Dollar.
You're the man who was sent here by the bonding company, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right. Who's this?
My name is Shade, Pat Shade. I'm a private detective working on the case for the bank.
Fine. I didn't know they'd hired one, too.
They call me every once in a while, tracing phonies mostly.
Is there any chance that you know the missing messenger?
Yeah, I know, Lillis. I had him tagged as a clean, honest kid. I still have.
What do you think happened then?
I'm afraid he was either snatched or killed, or both. But that's just my opinion. I wondered if you'd like to get together and compare notes.
I don't have any notes yet, but I'll be glad to pick up your brain.
Pick up your what?
I don't have any notes yet, but I'll be glad to pick your brain. Any place you say.
Edmund O'Brien, in another adventure of the man with the action-packed expense account. America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator...
While we're stopped,
Let's go back.
Let's take the whole opening again. And Bob, I have just a little too much voice.
Oh, jeez.
You mean I'm screaming?
From Hollywood.
From Hollywood, it's time now for Edmund O'Brien as...
Johnny Dollar?
You're the man who was sent here by the bonding company, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right. Who's this?
My name is Shade, Pat Shade. I'm a private detective working on the case for the bank.
Fine. I didn't know they'd hired one, too.
They call me every once in a while, tracing phonies mostly.
Is there any chance that you know the missing messenger?
Yeah, I know, Lillis. I had him tagged as a clean, honest kid, and I still have.
What do you think happened then?
I'm afraid he was either snatched or killed, or both. But that's just my opinion. I wondered if you'd like to get together and compare notes.
I don't have any notes yet, but I'll be glad to pick your brain. Any place you say.
Edmund O'Brien, in another adventure of the man with the action-packed expense account. America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator...
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Expense account submitted by Special Investigator Johnny Dollar to Home Office, Great Northern Bonding and Surety Company, Hartford, Connecticut. The following is an accounting of expenditures during my investigation of the Lillis bond matter. Expense account item 160. Expense account item 1, $62.80 airfare and incidentals between Hartford and Chicago. A few phone calls after checking into a hotel bore out the details given me when I was assigned the case. Henry Lillis, the messenger, had left the Golden State Bank at 10:30 a.m. He was carrying $80,000 in cash, and his destination was only a few blocks north on LaSalle Street. He never arrived there. At 5 that evening, in a bar near my hotel, I met the private detective working the case for the bank. Pat Shade was a puffy, florid man with past 50 beginning to show in his watery blue eyes.
I've been in the business for a long time. More years than I like to think. Left the police force and opened my own office in 1931, when Chicago was still the rawest town in the country.
Not exactly overdone right now, is it?
Quieted down a lot. Just as well for me. I'm too old for the rough work I used to do, and I'm getting older. I'll end up holding a sign at a school crossing one of these years. You younger fellas ought to think about it. Ought to get out of the business before it's too late. There's no future in it.
I've heard that said before, but never by anybody who left it for something better.
I wish I'd stayed on the force. I'd be on pension now. You know, Scotty Dyer's old man and I walked a beat together. Scotty's a good cop. What'd he tell you?
Nothing, really. I just phoned to check in with him, and he gave me a free hand. Tell me about this Henry Lillis.
Nothing much to tell. Bright kid, a couple of years out of high school. His father's dead, and he's got a mother to help support.
You think you know him well enough to be sure of the honesty you mentioned on the phone?
Sure? No. I'm not sure of anything anymore, anything or anybody. But there's nothing in his background to tell you anything else. He had to have a pretty good record to be bonded by this company, you know that.
That's why you think somebody grabbed him, huh?
It's my hunch, yeah, I think so. Do you know anything different?
No, but it strikes me that a snatch would be pretty hard to carry off in a street as busy as LaSalle at 10:30 in the morning without drawing some attention. Sergeant Dyer tells me none of the people who were near there at the time saw any trouble.
It would depend on how it was done. Now, understand, this is only my hunch. I don't have the case solved yet.
Has anybody talked to his mother, do you know?
I think the cops went out this morning.
I guess it'll be all right for me to go out this evening.
Worrying about her son, she's probably not going to be in very good shape.
Maybe not. But sometimes people who are in bad shape drop a lot of information they wouldn't drop otherwise. Shall we have another round? The Lillis house was a small one in a respectable but not plushy neighborhood. It had been painted recently, and its yard was well tended. I noted these things because they made it appear that, except for widowhood, Mrs. Lillis and her son were a comfortable and average American family. She was an attractive woman of some 40 years who, obviously and with good cause, had been crying.
Please sit down, Mr. Dollar.
Thank you.
The police have already been here. I suppose you know that.
Yes, I knew they'd come.
They didn't say it in so many words, but after they left, I realized they suspect that my son is responsible for this crime, don't they?
They aren't sure of anything yet, Mrs. Lillis.
It's terribly difficult, as a mother, to be fair and honest. If Henry did this thing himself, then at least he may be safe and unharmed, and he may come back and take his punishment. Do you understand?
Of course I do.
Naturally, my first instinct was to defend him against the suspicion. I couldn't believe it was possible that my son was a thief. But then I realized if someone else was responsible, then Henry had been kidnapped and would be in serious danger. So now, Mr. Dollar, I'm praying that my son is guilty. And if he is, I'll do everything I can to see him brought to justice.
I know it's a bad situation for you, but I'll make my part of it as easy as I can. Did your son say or do anything that would have indicated he was planning anything like this? Was he in trouble, or was there anything he wanted to get away from?
No, nothing that I noticed. Henry was forced into manhood quite early. He's been without a father since he was 9. He became quite independent, and he shared very little of his outside life with me. He may have wanted to get away from me, however.
You mean that he didn't like his responsibility?
Yes, he wants me to marry again.
I understood that he wasn't your sole support.
No, my husband left me a small income from his insurance. I own this house, but Henry's earnings have always helped.
Who are his friends, Mrs. Lillis? I may want to talk to them.
Oh, he sees hardly any of the friends he made in school. Most of them went on to college. There's one I know of, Raymond Lockhart. He works in a service station on North Michigan Avenue.
And you don't know who your son spent the rest of his time with?
I'm afraid I don't. Oh, I was very wise. I wasn't going to make the same mistake so many widows do with their sons, with possessiveness and too much prying in the name of protection. I let Henry work out his own life and asked very few questions. I was so wise. If Henry is guilty, I'm to blame for it. And he must be guilty and not dead.
Thanks, Mr. Sprague. Come in again, huh? Oh, I'm sorry. You caught me on a busy night. I read about this thing with Hank Lillis in tonight's paper. First I heard about it. You think he did it?
It's one possibility, Raymond. As a matter of fact, I looked you up to ask you the same question.
You mean, do I think he did it? Well, if it turns out that way, it'll sure be a surprise to me. The paper said they were looking into the idea that somebody could have forced him into a car.
Yeah, every angle is being covered.
Yeah, I've known Hank for a pretty long time. I trust him with my paycheck any day in the week. As far as I know, the only trouble he ever got into was kind of his temper. Got him into a few brawls.
When did you see him last?
Oh, gosh, I don't remember. You see, we used to get out in the town together once every 2 weeks or so, but we haven't for a couple of months. He won't admit it, but I think that he's pretty thick with this girl he's going with.
Oh? I didn't know about that.
Yeah. They stopped in here one night to gas up. It's her car. She's pretty all right. Blonde, but I don't know. She kind of struck me as a dish that's been around quite a bit, if you know what I mean. Sometimes you can tell the way they kind of look at you, you know?
What's her name, do you know?
Well, the more I think of it, if Hank is in trouble, I'll lay you 10 to 1 it is this blonde. What the devil was her name? I talked to him about her. Lily or Lillian, I think. Oh, what was her name?
His mother doesn't know about her, I take it. She didn't mention any girl.
No, this one is not the type to take home to Mother. He said he met her at the bank somewhere.
I can check that then.
Yeah. Be right with you. Right with you. If her father is some kind of a guard there or something.
Guard? A private detective by any chance? Was her last name Shade?
Shade, that's it. Lillian Shade. How could I forget a name like that?
Go ahead. Pour yourself another drink, Shade. I've got an extra bottle in my luggage.
Yeah. Did you tell the police about this?
Not yet.
This'll be the end for me if she's mixed up in it.
You know where she is?
Yeah, she told me she was going to spend a couple of days with a friend.
Why don't you check the friend? Maybe your daughter is there.
She didn't mention any names. She never does. She's no good. She's like her mother was. You mind?
Go ahead. Where is her mother?
She ran off with some guy. Lillian was about 5. I shipped her off to my sister in Minneapolis, but I had to take her back when my sister died. She started running wild when she was 13, and I never could stop her.
If they pull this together, it's liable to set child psychology back 20 years. The son of a mother who really tried to do the right thing, maybe tried too hard. And the daughter of a guy who didn't try at all. Did you make a point of not mentioning her when we were talking about the Lillis kid earlier?
I was waiting for you to ask that. I didn't know there was anything between them. She met him when she dropped in at the bank one morning. I guess I knew they met like that a few more times, but the rest of it I didn't know anything about.
Did she have a job?
She hasn't worked for a few months. When she does work, it's in some cheap bar, so that's worse.
Was it your car she drove?
No, it was hers.
You know the license number?
No, but that won't be hard to learn.
You're sure it was registered in her name, then?
Well, I never noticed the slip. I supposed it was. She said some friend bet some races for her, and she got it with the money she won. I can't see any reason why it wouldn't be in her name.
Yeah.
Dollar.
Huh?
It was damn decent of you to talk to me instead of going to the police.
Instead? I hope you aren't going to ask me not to give this to the police.
Oh, no, of course not. But I was going to ask you to let me tell them. It's going to look mighty bad for me if you go in, you know, with Scotty Dyer in charge of the case and his old man and I on the force together in the old days. I don't want it to look like I was holding back information from him.
Were you?
No, but I won't be able to prove it to you until we find Lillian. She'll tell you I didn't know anything about her and Henry.
All right, Shade. You going in tonight?
Just as soon as I leave here. And you don't have to do this, but I'd appreciate it if you could forget your calling me down here. It would be better for me if they didn't know you had to tell me about Lillian.
All I'm interested in is getting the money back. Doesn't make any difference what I say or don't say. You go to the police tonight, and we'll play it as it comes after that. Johnny Dollar.
This is Sergeant Dyer, Dollar.
Oh, yeah, Sergeant. You're on it early this morning. Anything doing?
Henry Lillis just gave himself up.
When? This morning?
Yep. Hitchhiked in from someplace up the lake. Something about a fight with one of the men in the deal. He's messed up some.
What about the money?
They need some medical work before we can get a decent statement from him. Shock, mostly. I put him in the hospital.
Didn't he say anything?
And he kept mumbling something about somebody with a name like Saunders. Go on down. We'll talk to him as soon as we can. I think he'll be ready to tell his part of the story anyway.
I met Sergeant Dyer at 10 that morning. It was after some 15 minutes of conversation had passed by without mention of Pat Shade that I learned he hadn't reported the night before. I brought up the subject myself, and Dyer knew him well enough to automatically reach for the phone and call the bar at my hotel. Shade had stayed there until it closed. 3 more calls to his office, his home, and the bank failed to raise him. But right then, it didn't seem too important to the case, since Henry Lillis was in custody. We got in to see him at 11:30. He was a slight, fair-haired kid, by this time past the feeling of fear. His face was pale and blotched with the disinfectant the doctor had put on some scratches and bruises.
Feel strong enough to talk now, Lillis?
I guess so.
This man is from the company that bonded you.
You don't look like you had much fun out of that 80 grand, Lillis.
No, I didn't.
Where is the money?
I don't know where it is now, but we took it to a house above Lake Bluff.
Who is we?
I don't care who it hurts now. Lillian Shade.
She was with you then?
She was with me or I was with her. I don't suppose it makes any difference. We were together.
You mentioned hurting somebody. Did you mean her father?
Yeah. He talked to me about her once. He told me she wasn't any good for me. I hated him then for saying that about his own daughter, but I sure wish I'd listened to him. I wish I'd believed him. None of this would have happened if I had.
It did happen, Lillis. We want to know about it. Everything about it.
Well, I don't know exactly how it started. I met her and I was stupid. I'd never known anybody like her before, and It sort of seemed as if we were in the same boat.
What do you mean, the same boat?
Well, neither one of us had all the things we wanted, and it looked like we never would.
If everybody in that boat turned criminal, there wouldn't be enough banks to go around.
Well, I never thought about it before, the way she did, but the longer I went with her, the more I began to. She'd done other things, never anything like this.
What kind of things?
Well, the way she got the money for her car. She met this man and learned some things from him. She did it so that it could never be called blackmail, and she got the money.
A badger game, maybe.
I don't think I know quite what that is.
Go on.
Well, I don't think I have to go through all of it, but, well, one night she kept talking about how I carried large amounts of money all the time, and that we didn't have... I don't think I have to go through all of it. But, well, one night she kept talking about how I carried large amounts of money all the time, and that we didn't have any of our own. She said she wouldn't marry me unless we could be rich. So we planned this thing. She waited down the street in her car 4 days in a row until I knew She waited down the street in her car 4 days in a row until I knew I was making a big transfer.
You knew how much you were carrying?
Not exactly, but, well, I'd worked there long enough to know when it was a big amount, you know, according to where it was going and things like that. So yesterday morning I got into the car, and by the time I was due back at the bank, we were out of town.
This house near Lake Bluff where you went, who's it belong to?
She said a friend who was on a trip someplace. She had a key. I think it belonged to this Sanders or Saunders or whatever it is.
How'd he fit in?
Well, I didn't know anything about him until he showed up late last night. Then I found out that Lillian didn't have any idea of going away with me like she'd said. From the beginning, she knew she wasn't. She was just using me, and this man, she called him Red, he told me to get out.
How much money was your share?
None of it. Not any of it. But I didn't even care about that. But Lillian had used me. When this Red told me, I went crazy, I guess. There was a fight. That I barely remember. I left the house, but I don't know where I went. And when it got light, I found the highway and started hitchhiking. Nobody picked me up because I was all bloody and my clothes were torn. And finally, this man did. He was a minister.
We left him after he gave us the best he could in the way of a description. The only thing Lillis seemed sure of was the route to the house near Lake Bluff. The three-state alarm was put out on Lillian Shade and the red-headed man in a green club coupe. In less than an hour, the sergeant and I had made our 20-mile trip and were approaching the place on a dirt driveway that stretched some 50 yards to the road.
Hey, hold it. It might not be as empty as it looks. A car on each side.
I think that might be the girls. Service station attendant described it for me. Means they both left in one car, don't you think?
Well, probably does. Guess with 80,000, one abandoned car wouldn't mean much. I think the house is empty, all right. Wouldn't make sense for it not to be. No. Well, it's locked.
Look, through here. Look at the furniture. That's where the fight went on.
It must have been quite a ruckus.
A friend of his told me Lillis packed quite a punch when he got started. Pretty good temper. Yeah, there by the wall. That lamp was thrown. It ought to carry some prints.
And we'll look through the rest of it. But I doubt if we'll ever find him.
Sergeant Dyer, over here in the kitchen. It's Lillian Shade. She's dead. And so homicide entered the picture and a new alarm was broadcast. Sanders or Saunders in a green club coupe. Wanted on suspicion of grand theft and murder. I had a different idea. I couldn't sell it to Sergeant Dyer, but it was one... I couldn't sell it to Sergeant Dyer, but it was one of those things that I couldn't drop. The police laboratory men started combing through the house, and I went back into the city. It was about 2 p.m, and Pat Shade was in his office.
Now, I can explain if you let me.
Never mind that. You know that Henry Lillis surrendered to the police, don't you?
didn't handle myself very well last night.
I'm not talking about last night.
I know. What I'm trying to tell you is that I didn't get around until late today, and I just read about it. Where is Lillian?
You know the house she goes to up near Lake Bluff?
No, I never heard her say anything about a house up there. Is that where you found her?
You were pretty drunk last night. Where'd you go?
Yes, I was pretty drunk last night. It's not every day you come to the end of your rope. That's where I got last night after more than 20 years in this filthy business.
Where did you go after you left the hotel bar?
I went home.
What time did you go to bed?
I don't remember.
Do you remember leaving again after you got home?
Where'd I go?
Your daughter was murdered last night.
But what are you accusing me of, young man?
I'm not accusing you of anything.
I wish I could talk about this later. I don't seem to be thinking very well.
I'm afraid we have to talk about it, Pat.
Yeah. You asked me if I knew about a house near Lake Bluff because you think I might have killed my daughter. That I might have waited until the red-headed man left for some reason and that I went in.
How'd you know about the red-headed man?
Henry Lillis' statement. Part of it was in the paper. Do you think I killed Lillian?
I know that last night you hated your daughter.
Yes, I did. I have nothing to lie for anymore, so I can be truthful. If I had struck Lillian last night, I wouldn't remember. It may be quite possible that I killed her. I don't remember.
I understand you found Pat Shade, Dollar. What do you have to say?
I'm not sure what he said because I don't know if his mind was working well or badly.
Here, this is the on-the-spot report from the lab men. There's more you can see before we start back.
Thanks. This is almost enough, isn't it?
Wait till you see the rest of it. You have a tough time squeezing out now. Well, shall we go? I hope you don't mind us busting in like this.
Hello, Lillis.
Hello.
We wondered if you could help us on a few details we're confused on.
All right.
Are you sure that the only cars that came up to Lake Bluff were Lillian Shades and this Saunders?
They're the only ones I knew about. Were there more?
That's what's confusing us. Now, this fight, it was in the front room and not in the kitchen, is that right?
Well, it's hard to remember, I think so.
And after And after that, you left, and then you caught a ride into town and gave yourself up.
Yeah.
Why'd you give yourself up, Lillis?
I don't know why. It just seemed like the only thing I could do.
Because maybe you thought if you gave yourself up on a grand theft charge and told a sad story that we'd never think of you in regard to murder.
Murder?
That's a dirt driveway, Lillis. The only car that drove up that driveway was Lillian Shades.
Looks like there wasn't any red-headed man there at all, doesn't it?
Like you messed up that room to make it look like there'd been a fight.
Fingerprint men aren't through.
All right! I didn't mean to kill her. We got out there and we had the money and she got scared. We looked at all of it. She went to pieces. She wanted to take it back and I knew we couldn't. I lost my temper and hit her because I was excited. I thought she was faking, but she wasn't. She wasn't faking. I didn't mean to.
We can go, can't we, Sergeant?
Yeah. I'll come back later for a statement.
Expense account item 2, $183.30, miscellaneous. Item 3, same as item 1, transportation back to Hartford. Expense account total, $308.90. Remarks? In his next statement, Henry Lillis revealed the hiding place where he'd put the stolen money, so the company won't lose. That's more than you can say for the two parents involved, either the deserving or the undeserving. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, stars Edmund O'Brien in the title role and is written by Gil Dowd with music by Wilbur Hatch. Edmund O'Brien can soon be seen in the Paramount Pictures production Warpath. Featured in tonight's cast were Herb Butterfield, Jeanette Nolan, Tony Barrett, Tim Graham, and Gil Stratton, Jr. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, was transcribed in Hollywood by Jaime Del Valle. This is Bob Lamond inviting you to join us next week at this time when Edmund O'Brien returns as...
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
I'm not kidding. They were falling down.
This is only a 15-minute show.
And you don't know who your son spent the rest of his time with?
I'm afraid I don't. I let Henry work out his own life and tried to ask very few questions. I thought I was so wise. Now, if Henry is guilty, I'm to blame for it. And he must be guilty. And not dead.
When did you see him last?
Gosh, I don't remember. See, we used to get out in the town together every 2 weeks or so, but not since he's been going with it.
When did you see him last?
Gosh, I don't remember. We used to get out on the town together every 2 weeks or so, but not since he's been going with his new girl.
Oh, I didn't know about her.
Yeah, she's pretty, all right, a blonde, but she kind of struck me as a dish that's been around quite a bit, if you know what I mean.
What's her name, do you know?
What the devil was it? Lily or Lillian, I think.
His mother doesn't know about her, I take it. She didn't mention any girl.
Well, she's not the type to take home to Mother. Her father's some kind of a guard at the bank.
Guard? Private detective by any chance? Was her last name Shade?
Shade, that's it. Lillian Shade. How could I forget a name like that?
Go ahead. Where is her mother?
She ran off with some guy. Lillian was about 5. I shipped her off to my sister in Minneapolis, but I had to take her back when my sister died. She started running wild when she was 13, and I never could stop her.
Did you make a point of not mentioning her when we were talking about the Lillis kid earlier? I met Sergeant Dyer at 10 that morning, and it was after some 15 minutes of conversation had passed by without mention of Pat Shade that I learned he hadn't reported the night before. But right then, it didn't seem too important to the case, since Henry Lillis was in custody. We got in to see him at 11:30. He was a slight, fair-haired kid, by this time past the feeling of fear. His face was pale and blotched with the disinfectant the doctor had put on some scratches and bruises.
From Hollywood, it's time now for Edmund O'Brien as...
Johnny Dollar.
This is Edward Whiteman, Mr. Dollar. I understand that Mr. Soderbury's death brought you here.
Yes, thanks for calling back. I tried to locate the constable, Fred Remen, I believe his name is.
Yes.
I haven't found him, so I thought I'd talk with you. You were riding with Mr. Soderbury when he was killed, is that right?
Yes, I was. I'll do everything I can to help you. And as a matter of fact, I just left Constable Remen.
Oh? Where is he? I'd like to see him.
He thinks he's found the place from which the shots were fired. The roof of Goodwin's store. I left him there less than 5 minutes ago. If you'll meet me in front of your hotel, I'll show you.
Thanks, Mr. Whiteman. I'll be down right away.
Edmund O'Brien, in a transcribed adventure of the man with the action-packed expense account, America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator...
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Expense account submitted by Special Investigator Johnny Dollar to Home Office, Britannia Life Insurance Company, Hartford, Connecticut. The following is an accounting of expenditures during my investigation of the Soderbury, Maine matter. Expense account item 1, $42.45, airfare, car rental, and incidentals between Hartford and Soderbury. I, for one, had never heard of the town, but I found it a few miles from Portland, Maine. First 2 church spires, and then the small group of companion buildings, all set against a peaceful New England background. The first thing I noticed when I drove onto its single business street was that some bunting, The first thing I noticed when I drove onto its single business street was that some bunting and a few American flags were still standing, reminders of the ceremony during which its leading citizen, Gordon Soderbury, had been murdered. His personal secretary and assistant, Edward Whiteman, gave me the details after I met him in front of my hotel.
The ceremony? Oh, yes, you wouldn't have noticed entering town from the east. You didn't know about the factory?
No, I hadn't heard. You one?
No, Mr. Soderbury... No, Mr. Soderbury built it during the first year of World War II. He won some subcontracts from the shipbuilders and hoped to bring new wealth to the town. The ceremony was arranged this morning because it reopened. No, it could hardly have been called happy even before the tragedy.
Oh? The town wasn't in favor of the factory?
Definitely not. We cross over here. These people are settled in their ways. The factory changed things. Outside men came into work, married local girls, and took them away. The farmers in the section lost the free labor of their sons to wages and had to hire older men.
I can see how it would upset a place like this. You think somebody could have been incensed enough over the reopening to have killed Mr. Soderbury?
I have no idea. I thought I should mention the feeling of the town. He and I were in the first of 3 cars driving to the factory. We were in the rear seat. Suddenly, he stiffened. He made this sound that... Well, I couldn't describe it. I didn't know what had happened. I don't think I heard the shots. He slumped forward. It was all over. This is Goodwin's store here.
Where was the car?
As closely as I can recall, it was directly in front. Straight out from here. Of course, the chauffeur stopped as soon as he realized what had happened. That'd be about up there, near the wagon.
It was a limousine, I hear. That's pretty close shooting. Were the windows up or down?
And they were down. Open, that is.
How do you get up on the roof of the store?
Oh, there's stairs in the rear. Fred! Oh, Constable Ryland!
Yes? Who's that?
Ed Whiteman. There's a man here who's been sent up from Connecticut to see you. Wants to ask you some questions. I have to go back to the office.
All right. What can I do for you?
Why did you pick this roof as the place where the shooting was done?
Because Mr. Soderbury's auto was just in front. And none of the others, 3 or 4 doors either side, have stairs to them.
That's good enough. Even resting a rifle barrel on the false front would be some pretty fancy shooting.
There have been some fair riflemen in the section for a good number of years now, if you know your history. I've been proud of their shooting at some of the matches we've had, but I can't say I'm so proud now.
Do you have any idea where to start?
There's been a man in my mind. Ben Sutherland. He had a 16-year-old son killed by a bandsaw when the factory was open before. And now he's got another, young Ben. He'll reach 16 next week.
We walked to the Sutherland house, which was only about a quarter of a mile away, and Fred Remond gave me the background of the town. The Soderburys had been in control of the town and the surrounding country for more than 3 generations. Always they had been respected as thrifty, honest people, but never had they been well-liked. The death of 53-year-old Gordon Soderbury meant the last of the male lineage. The sole survivor was his sister, Beth, many years his junior. The constable didn't seem impressed when I told him that potentially she was some $60,000 richer in cash in view of Gordon's insurance policy. We crossed a bridge to reach Ben Sutherland's house and found his wife waiting for us near the front door.
I know why you've come, Fred Remond. I heard about the trouble. Mr. Sutherland wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do such a thing.
Well, I didn't come to say right out that he did.
Where's your husband, Mr. Sutherland? Could we talk to him?
Who are you?
He's Mr. Dollar. Gordon Soderbury insured his own life. And this man is looking for the one that took it.
You'll both do better to go some other place with your questions.
We'd like to talk to your husband if you'll tell us where he is.
He ain't here.
And young Ben? Where is he?
He ain't here either.
Where did they go?
We wouldn't come here if we didn't have reason to. The constable told me your husband has made threats against Gordon Soderbury
because of the death of your other son. You must have known that. So now you must understand why we're here.
Mr. Sutherland's a God-fearing man, and he wouldn't take the law into his own hands. You know that, Benjamin. He called you his friend.
I'm nobody's friend now.
If you're convinced he had nothing to do with the trouble, why don't you tell us where he is?
Because he told me not to. I keep my husband's word. He said, don't tell anybody, so I won't.
Well, when did he leave?
Last night.
He drove his truck. I know the sound of it. And if he'd come through town, it would have woke me. So he went the other way. I know that road. And where he'd passed through. Well, you don't leave me no doubt, Mrs. Sutherland. I'll have to put the state police after the truck.
Your business, what you have to do, not mine.
Don't you see you're making it worse by trying to hide the truth?
Hide the truth? I'm keeping a trust, young man. And if you don't know the worth of a trust, you don't know the worth of anything.
I went back with Constable Raymond to his house where he lived alone and which doubled as an office. He phoned the description and license number of Sutherland's truck to his county superiors. And with the typical disinterest higher echelons seem to maintain for lower echelon problems, they told him they wouldn't be able to take delivery of Soderbury's body until the following day. That left us with no better than a vague promise as to when we'd get such vital points as the caliber of the murder weapon, the entry angle of the fatal bullet, and the distance from which it was fired. Remen left me and went to talk with some of the townspeople, and that evening, soon after dusk, I went to the Soderbury home, hoping that his sister Beth would be in condition to receive me.
Yes?
Is Miss Soderbury in?
Yes, she's in.
I wonder if she feels well enough to see me.
Does she know who you are?
Not yet. I've been hired by her brother's insurance company to look into his death. Would you tell her that, please?
Oh, yes, of course. Won't you come in?
Thank you.
My name's Taft. I'm a friend of the family's.
Taft? My name is Donald.
How do you do? Beth is in the sitting room. I'll leave it to your judgment. That is, I hope that if your visit upsets her, you won't press her.
I won't.
All right. Beth?
Yes, come in, Lawrence. Well, who was... Oh,
This is Mr. Dollar. He's from the insurance company.
I see. Please, sit down.
Thanks.
I don't believe I quite understand, Mr. Dollar.
I'm an insurance investigator.
Oh, of course. Then would you prefer that we talked in privacy?
Well, I leave that up to you, Miss Soderbury.
I think Mr. Taft has stayed out of a sense of duty.
No, I haven't.
But at least this will give you a chance to leave for a bit, Lawrence. I'll be all right.
All right, Beth. I probably should run home for a while.
All right. And thank you ever so much, Lawrence. You've been terribly helpful.
I'll phone you in an hour. Good evening, Mr. Dollar.
Good night, Mr. Taft.
Now, Mr. Dollar, when did you arrive?
About 3 this afternoon.
Then undoubtedly you know more about this horrible thing than I do.
I'm afraid it's not very much. I've been working with Constable Remen. He wants to narrow it down to one of the local men who is against the factory reopening. But from what I've learned, it refuses to be narrowed very much on that basis.
Yes, I'm afraid you're quite right. My brother was not famous for making friends. I say that at the risk of sounding cold and unemotional.
Emotion very seldom helps in my work.
Which is ferreting out the truth. I think Gordon understood what he was doing. I'm sure he did. He knew that our people detest change. They simply can't cope with it. Yet he forced it on them in 1942.
You feel yourself to be apart from your people, Miss Soderbury.
Yes, but only by reason of inheritance. Change was forced upon me, too. I was much younger than my brother. I was sent to school in England, but I came back and found it quite easy to forget and settle back into this tiny world.
I suppose the whole town did during the years after the factory closed.
Of course it did.
There was one particular man, Ben Sutherland. What do you think of him?
I don't know. I suppose his name is in everyone's mind tonight. The death of his son because of the hated factory, it had a violent reaction on him. And why not? He knew his son hadn't been born to stand in front of the machine that killed him. What does he say?
He can't be located. He left town last night. He took young Ben with him.
I hope it isn't he. He suffered enough. Oh, what could be troubling the general?
That your dog?
Yes, General Scott. He didn't alarm when you arrived, did he?
No, it's the first I've heard from him.
Oh, someone else's animal, perhaps.
That seldom happens. He's well able to fend for himself. He's a...
By the time we got an oil lantern lit and I found the dog, he was moving silently toward the house, trailing what looked like a fractured front leg. I didn't know what to think when I told the surviving sister about it. She didn't seem frightened. But I couldn't help wondering whether her loyalty to her people wasn't misplaced, and whether the killer hadn't decided to eliminate all the Soderburys from the town that bore their name. I phoned Constable Raymond as soon as I got back into the house, but it was a needless call. The sound of the shots in the quiet village had aroused everyone, and those who cared seemed to know right where to come. The first to arrive was Edward Whiteman, the dead man's assistant. Less than a minute later, the constable and Lawrence Taft. After we'd made another swing around the house without turning up anything, and after we'd satisfied ourselves that Beth Soderbury was well protected, Raymond and I started back toward my hotel. Tell me about Beth and these others, Whiteman and this man Taft.
Which end do you want first?
Whiteman, he's not a native, is he?
No, he's from Bangor. He came here when Mr. Soderbury commenced to open up.
He's not an old friend like Taft, then?
Not hardly. Lawrence Taft was orphaned a good deal back. His folks died in a fire. Mr. Soderbury took him in, sent him to school in Brunswick. Taft helped him with the factory last time. He made a smart man out of him, but I wouldn't say a happy one.
How come?
Unless folks leave town and never come back, they're all mixed up. When they're twixt and between, like Taft is, it ain't natural.
That's pretty much what Beth told me.
She and him have been sort of thick off and on. Well, I'll cut across here. You got your directions straight?
Yeah. Where was Lawrence Taft this morning, Constable?
You mean when the trouble broke out?
That's right.
With Miss Beth, most likely. Why?
I guess we can check that, then.
You aren't thinking he killed Mr. Soderbury, are you?
I don't want anything to slip by us.
You don't know us people. We pay what we owe if it takes all our life. The debt that was between them two was thicker than blood. Lawrence Taft would have killed himself before he would have killed Mr. Soderbury.
You know them better than I do.
That's the truth. I'll see you in the morning. I hope you sleep well.
The next day, things moved along a little more according to the book. The county men arrived before noon to remove the body for autopsy and ballistics examination, and soon after they left a report. The county men arrived before noon to remove the body for autopsy and ballistics examination, and soon after they left, a report came in from the state police. Ben Sutherland and his truck had been spotted leaving a town 5 miles away. A car escorted him to Soderbury, and the constable and I were at his house when he arrived.
Oh, Ben! Whatever happened to you? Ben!
Stop your nagging tongue. Go in the house where you're suited to be. I'll tend to your prying when I've a mind to.
Yes, Ben. I was only worried how you got hurt so horrible.
From the look of your face and your clothes, Ben, you've been through one thing or another.
Who might you be?
My name is Dollar. I'm an insurance investigator.
He's come to help me defend the laws of the state, Ben.
Then it's true, Fed, that Mr. Soderbury was shot and killed.
That's true.
When did you hear about it, Mr. Sutherland?
Those men that stopped me, they told me. They told me you wanted to talk to me about it, Fed.
That's true. And I don't take to it, because we were friends.
You left town night before last, Mr. Sutherland. Where'd you go?
Do I have to answer this stranger's questions?
It'll be better if you do.
That night I made up my mind what I had to do. I took young Ben away. That's my youngest son. I should have took my oldest boy. I knew I should have, but I listened to the talk about the factory and wages and such things. So I didn't take him, and that factory did. And I never got him back.
And you've blamed Gordon Soderbury for it all these years?
No, I blame myself. I knew what to do, and I didn't do it.
Didn't you make public threats against him?
That was a coward's talk. I talked big in front of my friends. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't kill him, Fred.
Where'd you go the other night?
I heard the talk start again. Young Ben talking about the factory, what the wages would buy. He'd be careful, he told me. And if he earned enough wages, he'd go to school like Lawrence Taft, crazy like his brother. And I put an axe handle to him and put him in the truck and carried him away.
Where, Mr. Sutherland?
He's on a farm where he belongs, up north, above Brighton. He's on a farm where he'll be safe.
How far away is it?
More than 20 miles.
What time did you leave?
After 9 o'clock.
You got there before midnight, then?
We slept in the truck. I left him with Alex Turner, son of him.
Then you had time to drive back here before the factory... Then you had time to drive back here before the factory ceremony started.
I went to Brighton.
Your face is scratched and cut. Your clothes are torn. How did that happen?
I fought with a man.
What man, and why did you fight?
I don't know what man. I don't know who. I fought because I was drunk. I went to Brighton to drink, and that's what I did. Not for 9 years has that happened.
You didn't come back here last night and have to fight off a dog at the Soderbury place?
I was in Brighton.
If you were, you'll probably be asked to prove it.
That's where I was.
And you'd better start remembering who you fought or who you were with. That's all for me, Constable. We were involved with approximately 280 people, most of whom were known to each other by sight, at least. The work Constable Remen had been doing without me had alibied most of them. Practically everybody had been on the street during the start of the ceremony and at the time of the shooting. Less than 40 were unaccounted for at 5:30 that afternoon when the county officers called in their report. Point of entry was just below the left armpit. The arm hadn't been touched. Angle of entry still made it look like the killer had fired from the roof of the store. And the murder weapon was identified as a not-too-common rifle, caliber .253. In an hour, the unaccounted-for citizens seemed to be trimmed down to 4 who owned that caliber rifle. Ben Sutherland was among them. It was close to noon the following day before the results of the test firing came back. The murder weapon wasn't among the rifles that were sent in.
Well, then I did something wrong. I am no great shakes at trouble like this.
It's not necessarily that we did something wrong, Constable. Maybe we just didn't do quite enough. One of those 253,000s got away from us.
A man's rifle is no secret here. He's proud of it.
What kind of rifle did Gordon Soderbury own?
Why?
The townspeople hated the factory. That's the motive we've given them. But none of them owned the murder weapon. Not even poor Ben Sutherland, with a stronger motive than anyone else. Unless he could have bought a rifle with just this in mind and kept it hidden.
I don't know.
We'll work on that, too. But for now, let's look at the people we've neglected. Edward Whiteman can't be involved because he was sitting next to the victim. You tell me Lawrence Taft is clear.
He wouldn't ever kill Mr. Soderbury.
Then the sister. She seems to belong more to the town than to the family. She didn't approve of what her brother was doing.
I can't hold a thing like that in my mind. We don't kill our kin here.
There are some that have. Will you do this for me? Will you get the 3 of them in here and keep them for an hour?
Well, how would I keep them?
I don't know. Write up a statement for them to sign, something about the ballistics reports. You can spend some time over them. Then ask the sister to go into detail about what she's going to do with the factory. I'll try to take less than an hour.
I ain't saying I can do it word for word, but I'll try. And if you'll write that statement, I'll be obliged. I ain't so good with a pencil.
It took me somewhat less than an hour, and what I found didn't make sense for a while. A rifle, well hidden beneath some torn clothes in the closet. The rifle's caliber matched that of the weapon that had killed Gordon Soderbury. I reached his home soon after his sister did.
Why, yes, he's here, Mr. Dollar.
How much do you know what lay behind the trouble the other morning?
I beg your pardon?
If you know who killed your brother, you'd better clear your skirts. 2 people are going to tear up any lies you tell.
Mr. Dollar, if you know, please tell me.
Lawrence Taft.
Oh, no. No, he didn't.
Why
do you say that?
You better say that first line again.
Oh, no. No, he didn't. Why do you say that?
We've pretty much cleared the whole town of the murder. You can't do that without having something left over.
Oh, but you're wrong. Lawrence wouldn't kill my brother.
That's what I've been told. But would you react the same way if Edward Whiteman was dead and I told you Taft had killed him?
I'm sorry. I don't... Lawrence, come here.
I'm here, Ben. But listen.
It isn't true. It isn't true, is it?
I heard what you said, Mr. Dollar. What reason would you have to say anything like that?
I just left your house. In it, I found a rifle and some clothing that was torn by the dog last night when you evidently came back to overhear what I said to Beth.
Lawrence.
You didn't have any reason to kill Gordon Soderbury, did you?
No, I didn't.
But you hated Whiteman, didn't you?
What reason would I...
The factory, for one. You were important last time, but you were left out the other morning, isn't that right?
Oh, always the factory. What difference did it make to you, Lawrence?
Remen told me you people always paid your debts. Maybe that was it. That an outsider came in and forced him out so he couldn't prove himself. Maybe he was afraid Whiteman would force him out of your life, too. I don't know.
Lawrence, you didn't think that I...
Yes.
You did try to kill Edward Whiteman, didn't you?
Yes.
And Gordon Soderbury was killed by mistake.
Yes.
Lawrence, no.
I didn't mean to. I know I'm weak and I'm mixed up. I don't know where I belong, but I knew he couldn't stay here. Whiteman was taking my place, and I knew people were laughing at me because I failed. I did try to kill him. Thought it was for you. I didn't know until later. Later I found out. Later, found out it was Gordon. It was dead. Gordon. I owe him everything.
Expense account item 2, same as item 1, transportation back to Hartford. Expense account total, $84.90. Remarks? None. Except that maybe the now wealthy Beth Soderbury may have been right. That anybody with generations of background in an insular village like that does take a gamble when he comes out. To say nothing of a half-generation Hartfordian when he goes in. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, stars Edmund O'Brien in the title role and is written by Gil Dowd with music by Wilbur Hatch. Edmund O'Brien can soon be seen in the Paramount Pictures production Warpath. Featured in tonight's cast were Robert North, Howard McNear, Virginia Gregg, Larry Thor, Sammy Hill, Herb Butterfield, and David Light. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, was transcribed in Hollywood by Jaime Del Valle. This is Bob Lamont inviting you to join us next week at this time when Edmund O'Brien returns as...
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
From Hollywood, it's time now for Edmund O'Brien as...
Johnny Dollar.
Mitchell Dollar.
Oh, swell. Take some warm milk. You'll be asleep in an hour.
I'm sorry to wake you up, but this is important.
Okay.
How fast can you get to New York?
Pretty fast. If you let me get out of bed and slip on some clothes, I might make it in a couple of hours.
Well, it's 5:30. You get to the New York office by the time it opens.
Unless I get a 40-mile tailwind, you're going to be an awful liar. What's this all about?
The double indemnity. A man named Farmer burned to death. He has a wife. She gets $100,000 unless...
She likes fires. Okay, I'll get out of bed.
Edmund O'Brien in another adventure of the man with the action-packed expense account, America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Expense account submitted by Special Investigator Johnny Dollar to Home Office, Great Eastern Life Insurance Company, Hartford, Connecticut. The following is an accounting of expenditures during my investigation of the George Farmer matter. Expense account item 1, $5.80 for gas and a cup of coffee between Hartford and your New York office.
Oh, come in, Mr. Dollar. Mr. Mitchell called me this morning, 5 o'clock, said you'd be here.
He called me at 5:30.
He must have been very sure you'd take the job.
He's familiar with my bank account.
Here are the briefs on the case. Mr. Farmer was on his vacation in the Catskills, a place called the Sportsman's Retreat.
Uh-huh. This is the correct address on the wife?
Yes. Oh, excuse me. Yes? Who? Oh, put him on. Yes, hello, Dr. Evans. Yes. Farmer? George Farmer? Yes, that's right. Our investigator's here now. All right, I'll have him come right over. Sir. This is Dr. William Evans, one of our insurance doctors. He says he has some information on the Farmer case.
Oh?
He was the one that okayed Farmer for the policy. He's in the Equitable building. You better go on over. He says it's rather important.
Expense account item 2, $1 for cab fare and tip to the Equitable building. You may ask why I didn't use my car, in which case I may ask if you've ever been absurd enough to wheel your own car through early morning New York traffic. As my cab pulled up at the entrance of the Equitable building, I spotted a large crowd, several police cars, and an ambulance.
All right, just keep it back. Okay, you. Where do you think you're going?
What happened?
Some guy jumped 8 floors.
A Dr. Evans?
I don't know. What makes you think it was this doctor?
I haven't had an easy case in 2 years. What did you bet? His name's Evans.
Hey, Jake, any identification?
Yeah. Some doctor works the building. Name's Evans.
Be glad you're not a betting man, Sergeant.
Wait just a minute, Joe.
Sure.
Hey, Jake, come here.
What is it?
This guy knew who the guy was who jumped.
Yeah?
Knew who it was before he ever saw him. Didn't even know the guy had jumped till I told him. And he just up and bet me it was this Dr. Evans.
What's your name?
Johnny Dollar.
I think you better come up and see a lieutenant.
I think I better, too. Jake followed me into the building and took me up to the 8th floor where I met Lieutenant William Briggs, a nice guy who worked for homicide and had done me a few favors in the past.
Hi, Dollar.
Hello, Bill.
You know this guy, Lieutenant?
Yeah, why? Where'd you find him?
He knew the guy who jumped.
I made a guess. Evans called my office on an insurance matter. Who pushed him?
What makes you think he was pushed?
Why call me, then take an 8-floor dive?
I don't know. You got any ideas?
Anybody see him jump?
A couple of people. He came out of the window feet first. They didn't see anybody give him a hand.
Well, let me know if you find anybody who might have, huh? I'd appreciate the information.
I'd appreciate some, too.
Expense account item 3, $1.50 for another cab to the home of Mrs. George Farmer. On the way over, I tried to put the first pieces together. A man named Farmer burned to death. A doctor named Evans had examined him and had some information. Evans winds up dead on the sidewalk. Answer, maybe Mrs. Farmer had it.
Come in, Mr. Dollar.
Thank you.
It's going to be another hot day. I think everybody should have air conditioning, don't you?
Definitely.
Just make yourself comfortable. Can I get you something cold?
Oh, no, thank you. I'd like to ask you some questions, Mrs. Farmer.
About my husband's death?
Yes.
I've already talked to Mr. Arthur from your office, and I've told the police everything I know.
Do you know a Dr. Evans?
Dr. Evans? No. No, I don't know any Dr. Evans.
Your husband never mentioned him.
No. What's he got to do with my husband?
He examined him for his policy. Do you know who sold your husband his policy?
I thought you were from the company.
Late hunch. Thought you might save me the trouble of checking.
No, I don't remember who sold him the policy.
All right, Mrs. Farmer. Thank you very much.
Is that all?
Yes, Mrs. Farmer. That's all for now. Expense account item 4, $1.15 for another cab back to the offices of Great Eastern Insurance, where I looked up the name of the agent who sold Farmer his policy. He was Martin Ames, and he lived on the east side. Item 5, 10 cents by subway to the east side. Not conscience-stricken, just tired of cabs.
Yes, what is it?
I'm looking for Martin Ames. Hey, take it easy. What's wrong?
I'm Mrs. Ames. I was just on my way to the hospital. Martin's been in an automobile accident.
Expense account item 6, $8 for a cab. Fast and necessary. $3 for the necessary, $5 for the tip to make it fast.
Nurse?
Yes?
I'm Mrs. Ames. I was told my husband...
Oh, yes, Mrs. Ames, if you'll just have a seat.
Who's in charge of the case?
Dr. Gerson, I'll call him.
But I want to see my husband. Can't I see him?
You'll have to see Dr. Gerson first.
But I want to know how serious it is. I should be with my husband if it's
If
serious.
you'll just be patient for a moment, I'll get Dr. Tully.
Come on, Mrs. Ames. Let's sit down over here. Come on. Now, just try and take it easy. Everything's going to be all right, believe me.
Dr. Gerson, third floor reception. Dr. Gerson, third floor reception, please.
Hello, darling. Oh, hello, Bill.
Dr. Gerson,
No, this is Lieutenant Briggs, Mrs. Ames.
police officer.
Just a friend.
Nothing about my husband.
No, Dr. Gerson's the man you want to see.
Can I talk with you, darling?
Yeah, sure. You'll excuse me, Mrs. Ames?
Yes, of course.
You'll be all right?
I'll be all right.
Okay, Lieutenant.
This is far enough.
About her husband?
Yeah. Died 5 minutes ago.
Accident?
Hit and run. Before he died, he told us a car ran him off the road. He went down a 20-foot embankment and right into a cement retaining wall. Wall stopped him from going any further, but it broke his neck.
Any lead on the other car?
Lonely stretch of road. No one else saw it, and it happened too fast for Ames to see much. One of your company salesmen, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Oh, there's Dr. Gerson.
I don't envy him. Come on, Briggs. This is turning into a rotten mess.
Yes? Oh,
Good afternoon, Mrs. Farmer. This is Lieutenant Briggs.
more questions?
Afraid so.
Come in. Sit down.
Thank you.
Mrs. Farmer, 2 men have been killed today. Both of them knew your husband.
What are you getting at, Lieutenant?
I'm not sure. Where were you at the time of your husband's death?
Right here. Right in this apartment.
Why didn't you go with him to the Catskills?
Because I didn't feel like it this year. He's been going to Catskills every year for the past 15 years, and I was getting tired of it. Are you trying to imply that my husband's death was not an accident?
We're just trying to find out why 2 men were killed.
What have these 2 men got to do with my husband? Who are they?
One was the doctor I mentioned this morning.
I told you I never heard of him.
The other was the insurance man who sold your husband his policy.
I don't know anything about him. I never met him.
Your husband started the fire by smoking in bed and then falling asleep.
I guess so. How would I know?
Was he in the habit of doing that?
We've done it once or twice over a period of 15 years. Mr. Dollar, it seems to me your company is trying its best to get out of paying the money that's due to me.
We're always allowed a certain time for an investigation.
A representative from your company went up to the lodge and made an investigation. What more do you want?
You were here in town at the time of your husband's death?
Yes, and I can prove it. Now, if you have any further questions, I suggest you take them up with my attorney. I'm sick and tired of this whole thing. You've had absolutely no consideration for me. My husband is dead, and you persist in foolish, tiring questions. Now, please leave. I can't stand much more.
All right, Mrs. Farmer.
Don't bother showing us to the door.
I'm entitled to that money, Mr. Dollar. I hope it won't be necessary to take legal action.
Oh. Want to take a run up to Sportsman's Retreat, Lieutenant? Why? I'm just interested in knowing how Mrs. Farmer knew one of our investigators had already been up there.
We will return you to the second act of yours truly, Johnny Dollar, in just a moment. A brilliant orchestra leader and a rising young singing star will be found at CBS, the Star's Address, starting tomorrow. Guy Lombardo and his famous orchestra are taking the place of Jack Benny, and Mario Lanza, the sensational tenor of records and films, will be heard on most of these same stations in place of Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy. Be listening for their programs every Sunday, won't you? Now, with our star Edmund O'Brien, we return you to the second act of yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Briggs and I climbed into the squad car and started the long drive for the Catskills. Around 7 in the morning, we turned off the main highway and onto a dirt road. A sign reading Sportsman's Retreat, 2 miles, pointed the way, and 20 minutes later, we were pulling up in front of the main lodge.
Oh, I got a stiff neck.
Man coming out of the lodge.
Well, morning.
Good morning.
Well, I suppose you could... Oh, police car, huh?
Yeah, I'm Lieutenant Briggs. This is Mr. Dollar.
Oh, Mr. Well, howdy. You up here about Mr. Farmer's death?
Yeah, unofficially. You run the place?
Well, yes, I'm the foreman. My name's Pop Sloan. Everybody just calls me Pop.
We thought we'd stay a while, Pop. Can you put us up?
Why, why, sure. How long you figure on being around?
Not long.
Well, come on in. Come in. Breakfast was an hour ago. If you're hungry, I can have the cook rustle up some old any bacon and eggs or anything.
Oh, sounds good. Many people staying here, Pop?
Oh, about 14. 14. The same crowd comes up every year. It's sort of a club, you might call it.
How many years did George Farmer come up?
Oh, about the last 15 years, I guess.
Who owns the place?
Mr. Phillips. He ain't here now. He phoned and said he'd be in sometime this afternoon. Say, how come you fellas are interested in Mr. Farmer's death? We had the sheriff investigate. Some insurance fellow was up here for 3 days. You're a little late, ain't you?
Well, a few things we haven't cleared up, Pop.
Sure appreciate some help.
Well, yeah, I'll give you all the help I can. I'll go get some breakfast for you, and then we can gab a while,
Pop went back to the kitchen, and we relaxed in a couple of big leather chairs in front of a large window that looked out on a row of cabins.
Well, that last cabin must have been Farmer's.
Yeah, nothing much left of it.
Beautiful up here, isn't it, Johnny? Look at those trees with the sun shining through them.
Lieutenant.
Yeah?
Your soul is showing. It was beautiful, all right. The cabin stood in a clearing, fronted by well-kept paths and backed by tall trees. Pop came in with enough bacon and eggs to feed a platoon of tapeworms, and we talked.
Hey, where is everybody, Pop?
Oh, out fishing. We get up about 4. It's about 4:30 around here.
Many of the men bring their wives?
Bring their wives. Well, some of them. Mr. Farmer used to bring his up every year. He was the most beautiful. It's a fine-looking woman, Mrs. Farmer. Didn't come up this year, though. It's too bad, too.
Oh, really? Why?
Well, I might have saved him. Maybe if she'd have been here, she might have caught him with a cigarette before he went to sleep.
Well, who discovered the fire?
Who did? Well, we all saw it, but it was too late. The time we got there, the whole place was burning. By the time we got the hoses going, there wasn't much left.
You say you all saw it? Where were you?
Where were we? Why, we was up the Willow Peak cooking out. It's about 3 miles from camp. See it right from here. You see it, there's that tall peak there to the left. To the left, there's those trees.
Yeah. How come Farmer didn't go along?
Oh, I don't know. He never went on many hikes. He had trouble with his legs.
Anyone stay here in the camp besides Farmer?
No. Everybody was up at Willow Peak.
Who examined the body?
Well, Doc Combs from Evanston come up and looked at the body.
Where is Evanston?
Well, Evanston is about 50 miles east. But if you want to talk to the doc, you'll have to wait until he comes in from fishing.
He's up here now?
Yeah, he come up last night. He's going to stay a week with the fishing.
Huh?
Well, good morning, Mr. Phillips. Didn't you expect you till this afternoon? This is Mr. Phillips, the owner.
How are you?
Hello.
Some more police fellows, Mr. Phillips.
Oh, about Mr. Farmer's death?
Johnny Dollar. Yeah, I'm an insurance investigator. This is Lieutenant Briggs. He's the policeman.
Well, I thought you both...
I've got some bags in the car, Pop. Would you get them, please?
Would you get... Well, yeah, sure.
We just wanted to ask a couple of questions, Mr. Phillips.
Oh, I thought the authorities were satisfied.
Where were you when the accident occurred, Mr. Phillips?
Well, I was on my way here from the city. I arrived about an hour later.
You live in the city?
I have a house there. I divide my time between there and the lodge.
Tell us something about Farmer, Mr. Phillips. What kind of a man was he?
You fellas want any more breakfast?
No, thanks, Pop. Go ahead, Mr. Phillips.
Well, there really isn't much to tell. Farmer was a nice sort of guy, quiet.
Do you have any trouble with him smoking in bed before?
Several times. Nearly started a fire 2 years ago.
Wouldn't that make you watch him a little more closely?
His wife came up with him every year, but this one, she was usually near enough to prevent any trouble. Isn't your company satisfied, Mr. Dollar?
Routine. How long did Farmer usually stay here?
Oh, a week, 10 days. However long his vacation lasted.
He was in the advertising business, wasn't he?
Yeah, I believe so.
How much did it cost him to come up here every year?
Oh, anywhere from $200 to $300. He was tight as the devil, known for it. This was the only luxury he allowed himself. He'd tell everyone he'd save all year just to come up here and relax for a week.
Lieutenant, Mr. Dollar, here comes Doc Holmes. What's it got in limit?
You interested in talking to the doctor?
Yeah, Pop tells us he was the one who examined the body.
What did you get, Doc?
Hi, Pop. Got my limit.
Well, good for you. Come on over here. A couple of fellas want to talk to you.
Well, how are you, Phil? Pop said you weren't due in till this afternoon. I'm fine, Doc. This is Lieutenant Briggs and Mr. Dollar.
How are you, Doctor?
Police?
Him. The other's an insurance investigator. I want to ask you a few questions. Clear up a few things about George Farmer getting burned to death.
All right. Thanks, Pop.
What happened? Hey,
How about having a cook clean up those fish, Pop?
The fish? Well, all right, sure.
I don't think I could tell you much more than I've already told the sheriff.
Did you know George Farmer prior to his death?
Yes. Over a period of 10 years.
Did you identify the body?
Well, not at first. It was pretty badly burned.
Not at first. Well, how were you able to identify it later?
Well, when they told me that George had a broken wrist, I found the broken section of bone and identified it.
Broken wrist?
Yes, Mr. Dollar. When George arrived, his lower arm was in a cast. He told us that he'd broken his wrist the week before.
What day did he arrive?
Tuesday of last week.
Which wrist was broken?
The right one.
Would you say he could move his fingers well enough to write?
Depends on how recent the accident.
What are you getting at, Dollar?
Do either of you know where Farmer had his wrist treated?
No. Dollar, would you mind letting me know?
Briggs, can you call the precinct and have a man check and find out where Farmer had that wrist treated?
Sure, but I don't see why.
George Farmer had to sign that insurance policy, didn't he?
Well, he could have done it with his left hand.
Go find out when he broke that wrist. And I think I can show you that George Farmer was murdered.
Murdered?
We all waited while Briggs put in a call to his precinct and sent a man out to check on where George Farmer had his wrist treated. Around noon, the call came in.
George Farmer broke his wrist on the 26th of last month.
That tears it.
Was treated at the Olive Hospital.
3 weeks ago.
Stayed one night at the hospital and went home.
What date did he arrive here, Mr. Phillips?
About the 4th.
2 weeks after the accident. He died on the 11th.
That's right. Been here about a week.
Dollar, would you mind telling me just what you're driving at?
The insurance policy went into effect the 22nd of last month. The first claim on George Farmer's policy was the double indemnity clause, not an accident claim for a broken wrist. Come on, Briggs. Let's go back to town. Talk to Mrs. Farmer.
All right, what is it this time?
We'd better talk about it inside.
I promise you, Mr. Dollar, if you continue...
We're coming in.
Why? Well, all right.
We think your husband was murdered.
Murdered? That's ridiculous.
We feel that you were an accomplice, Mrs. Farmer.
Are you serious?
Very. We just had the lab make a check on the insurance policy. The signature and the fingerprints were from the right hand.
Of course they were.
So your husband didn't have a broken wrist at the time?
No, we did that sometime later.
Would you swear it's his signature on the policy?
Of course it's his signature. I went to the doctor with him.
I thought you said you didn't know Dr. Evans.
I don't.
He was the insurance doctor.
Well, I'd never seen him before or since. How could you expect me to remember
Your
him?
husband didn't turn in a claim for his broken wrist?
That was his business, wasn't it?
Don't you think it's rather strange to take out an accident policy and not turn in a claim on your first accident?
I don't know. I didn't bother with my husband's affairs.
Is this your husband's driver's license?
Yes, where did you get that?
Motor vehicle department.
The signature on his license is not the same as the one on the insurance policy.
What do you mean?
He means that the signature on the policy is a very clever forgery. Who forged it, Mrs. Farmer?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Who went to that doctor's office representing your husband?
No one. Why in the world would anyone do that? Why would someone represent my husband?
For a $100,000 insurance claim.
That's awful. Get out of here. That's not true. I'll sue you for saying that.
Your husband wouldn't take out a large policy on himself, so with someone's help, you took one out for him and planned his death.
Who was in on it with you? Who killed your husband up at the lodge?
Get out! Get out!
It had to be someone at the lodge who knew what cabin he was in.
No!
The insurance salesman and the doctor were both killed because they could identify the man who took out the policy as not being your husband.
No!
Your husband was going to take this trip, so you planned his death and stayed home for an alibi.
A man killed the doctor and the insurance agent. Someone strong enough to run a car off the road and lift an unconscious man out of a window feet first.
Who killed him, Mrs. Farmer?
I did.
Phil!
Good evening, Mr. Phillips.
Why did you come out? Why didn't you stay in the other room?
They'd have worn you down sooner or later. The car's in the back. Hurry up.
You did some fast driving.
Left the lodge right after you did. Go on, Lorna.
All right.
Stay right where you are, Mrs. Farmer.
I don't think you're in any position to be giving orders, Lieutenant.
Sure he is. We expected you. Told you where we were going, gave you enough time to get here.
And what are you going to do about it?
Take you.
Phil!
Forgetting my gun.
You're forgetting ours. Think you can shoot both of us before we get them out?
I can try.
Then try.
Phil, no!
Get out of the way!
Dollar?
Okay. Just a little scared.
Girl's hit. Phillips is pretty dead.
Mrs. Farmer?
Yes.
I'll get an ambulance.
You want to tell me about it?
Oh, all right. Don't make any difference now.
Phillips killed your husband and the other two men?
Yeah. We fell in love 3 summers ago. But he planned it. The whole thing was his idea.
Sure, I know. The state is pretty narrow-minded about those things, honey. A guy like that gets ideas and gets dead for it. If you like his ideas, you just have to get into some kind of trouble along the way. Expense account item 6, $11. Dinner for two. The good Lieutenant Briggs deserved all the stroke in our P8. Item 7, $5.10 for gas back to Hartford. Expense account total, $33.65. Remarks? Mrs. Farmer will probably get second degree for complicity. Great Eastern can cancel payment in accordance with the specifications set forth in said policy. Additional item, 12 hours good solid sleep for yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, stars Edmund O'Brien in the title role and was written by Blake Edwards with music by Wilbur Hatch. Edmund O'Brien can soon be seen in the Paramount Pictures production, Warpath. Featured in tonight's cast were Hy Averback, John McIntyre, Herb Butterfield, Harry Lang, Jeanette Nolan, and Virginia Gregg. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, is produced and directed by Jaime Del Valle. This is Dick Cutting inviting you to join us next week at this time when Edmund O'Brien returns as...
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
It's the case of the uninvited guest that'll bring you true police adventures on Gangbusters this evening. Your narrator will be San Francisco's police chief. Gangbusters is heard every Saturday on most of these same CBS stations. Stay tuned now for 5 minutes of the latest news, which follows immediately over most of these same CBS stations. This is CBS, where you meet adventure with Charlie Wilde. Sunday is the Columbia Broadcasting System.
From Hollywood, it's time now for Edmund O'Brien as...
Johnny Dollar?
Hello, Mr. Dollar. This is Dr. Carr.
Yes?
Sergeant Wright had to go back to his office and asked if I would call you.
Oh, I get it now. The Boldrick shooting. Sorry, I understood Dr. Stone was on the case.
We've both been attending Boldrick.
What's his condition now, Doctor?
He's improved some, but he'll be lucky to live. We gave him 3 blood transfusions this afternoon, and this evening he regained consciousness.
Was Sergeant Wright there at that time?
Yes.
What did Boldrick say? Did he say who shot him?
No, he wouldn't talk about it. Said he didn't remember, but he was lucid when he arrived.
Oh. When do you think I can see him?
Well, that's why I called, Mr. Dollar. You can see him this evening. Sergeant Wright hopes that since you aren't a police officer, perhaps Boldrick will talk to you.
Well, I can try. I'll be there in about 45 minutes.
Edmund O'Brien in a transcribed adventure of the man with the action-packed expense account, America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Expense account submitted by Special Investigator Johnny Dollar to Home Office, Corinthian All Risk Insurance Company, Hartford, Connecticut. The following is an accounting of expenditures during my investigation of the Arthur Boldrick matter. Expense account item 1, $2.30 cab fare from my apartment to the emergency hospital.
I wouldn't stay with him too long, Dollar.
All right,
Just
Doctor.
a few minutes. You'll be able to tell when he tires. This is the room. Well, Boldrick, how are you feeling now?
I don't know.
You're coming along fine. This is Mr. Dollar. He represents your insurance company.
Hello, Boldrick. Sorry about what happened.
Yeah.
Mr. Dollar wants to ask you a few questions. I've told him not to stay too long, but if you feel tired, you can tell him to leave. I'll drop by and see you later.
You think I'm going to die? Is that why you're here?
Oh, of course not. Doctor told me you were out of danger. I've just got some routine questions to ask you. You say it was a man that shot you?
Yeah. Somebody I never saw before, that I can remember. But I don't know what happened.
You remember where you were when you were shot?
It was in the backyard near the garage. I was right by the garage door, and this guy come around from the alley, and...
What did he say to you?
He was after the car keys. I had them in my hand. He made a grab for me. He said, "Give me those keys," or something like that. And I gave him a push, and that's when he shot me. After then,
I didn't even know he had a gun.
You didn't see it when he asked for the keys?
No, if I'd have saw it, he could have had the keys. I don't fight no man with a gun.
What did he look like?
Oh, that's one of the things I don't remember too good. It happened so fast. He was wearing like overalls or something.
What color?
Oh, blue. It seems like only faded. Could have been shirt and pants, too. It was awful fast. There he was, and then it happened.
What else about him?
That's about all. I think he was sort of dark, but I don't think I'd even know him for sure if I saw him again. Maybe I would.
Maybe you'll remember more if you try.
I will. I figure this guy, whoever he was in trouble or something, and he just needed a car in a hurry.
But he didn't take the keys.
Well, I figured he lost his nerve. Wilma come running out when she heard the noise. Will Wheeler from next door. This guy was gone when they got to me.
Well, I won't bother you any longer, Boldrick. You will help find this man if you'll think about it as much as you can and try to remember what he looked like.
Don't worry, I will. Hey, mister, do you think they'll let my wife come to see me tonight? I'd sure like to see her.
I don't know. But I'll ask Dr. Carf on the way out. I'll see you later, Boulder. I made my report to the sergeant, and a search was started for a dark man dressed in a faded blue work clothes and possibly armed with a .25 caliber pistol or revolver. It was only 7 o'clock, barely dusk, so I cabbed out to the Boldrick address. It was a single-story, run-down house in the neighborhood we Hartfordians choose to call an older part of town rather than a slum. His wife was a work-worn woman who looked older than her 34 years. She led me into the backyard and showed me the garage that faced down an alley and the spot still stained where her husband had lain.
It was there.
Nobody was in sight when you got out here?
Mm-mm. I didn't see nobody. Neither did Will Wheeler.
Your husband mentioned him. He lives next door?
Yeah, that house.
And this man must have run down the alley. Does it open onto a street at both ends of the block?
Yeah. It runs clear down to Lawrence and up to about Cedar the other way.
I should think that most of the people in the neighborhood would be home at that time. The time he was shot. Wouldn't you?
I should think so, yeah.
And the police will probably find somebody who saw this man running down the alley.
I think somebody saw him. But most people...
Wilma, everything all right?
Yeah, Will. It's all right.
Somebody's bothering you and you don't feel like it, just tell me.
It's all right, Will. He's from the insurance.
My name is Dollar. You must be Mr. Wheeler.
That's right. I don't think nobody ought to be bothering Velma in the middle of all this trouble.
I wanted to meet her and ask a few questions, that's all. I'm through.
All right, then go on in the house, Velma. Try and get some rest.
If it's all right, then.
Sure, Mrs. Boldrick. Thanks very much.
All right. I guess I couldn't help very much.
This has got her in pretty bad shape, finding art like that. And then they won't let her go unseen. How is he, do you know?
Pretty bad. I saw him a little while ago.
Was he making sense?
Seemed to be.
Before the ambulance picked him up, he was kind of off. All he could say was some guy shot him, that he didn't know. Something about the car keys.
But he told me, too.
Yeah, this is a rotten neighborhood. It's full of rotten people. He isn't going to die, is he?
They don't know.
You didn't tell Velma that, did you?
No, but I think somebody should before she reads it in the papers. One of the dangers is a wound he got in the last war.
Oh, yeah, in the lung.
2 slugs he took this afternoon may take care of the other one.
Oh. I didn't think it was as bad as that. I guess I'd better tell her. I've been a friend of Art's for a long time. Well, I will see you later, Mr. Dollar.
As I left the neighborhood, I noticed 2 police cars, so I knew Sergeant Wright's men were at work. I was in his office a little later when 2 of the men brought a witness in.
This is Mr. Dollar, Mrs. Cole.
How do you do?
Mrs. Cole?
It was nice of you to come in.
I thought it was my duty. The other policeman wanted to know if I was in my backyard near the alley when there was that shooting, and I was.
How far from the Boldrick house do you live, Mrs. Cole?
Well, there's 2 houses between theirs and where I live. Those policemen told me they were looking for somebody who saw a man running down the alley. I've got a garden out back, and that's where I was when I heard the shots. I didn't see no man running, but I saw a car come from that way.
Which way do you live from the Boldricks, Mrs. Cole?
Down from them. South, that is.
And did you recognize this car?
No, I didn't. I didn't see the man in it either, but it came from that way.
Did you see anybody else in the alley at the time?
No. At first, after I saw the car, I thought it was backfired. But then when I heard about the trouble, I remembered the car.
Well, we're glad you did, Mrs. Cole.
Was the car traveling fast or slow, would you say?
Oh, about medium, I'd say. They can't go too fast in the alley on account of the chuck holes.
What color was it?
Tan or brown. I don't know much about what kind it could be. I think you could call it a sedan.
Anything else, Dollar?
Not right now.
The officers you came in with will want to ask you a few more questions, and then they'll drive you home, Mrs. Cole.
No.
I want to thank you very much.
Well, I hope I've been some help.
Good night, Mrs. Cole.
Good night.
Nothing fits, Dollar. 3 witnesses on the other side of Boldrick's place swear they would have seen anybody running in the alley at that time. And this one says she saw a car leaving.
Oh, it's still early. I guess we'd better phone the hospital, find out if we can see him, huh?
Yeah. Yep. I'll put out an alarm on a brown or tan sedan, and then I'll call. Hello, Boldrick. How you feeling now?
Not so good. How come they tell me I'm not strong enough to see my wife, and then they let you guys come in? I want to see her.
It'll only be a few minutes. We thought you'd like to know what they found out about the shooting.
Sure I would. What?
Well, enough to make us wonder if you're telling the truth about what happened.
I don't get you.
3 witnesses who live in your block say that a man didn't run down the alley after the shooting.
Well, I can't help what they said, can I?
But another witness said she saw a car drive away.
The more people we question, Boldrick, the less possible it seems that this man you talk about could have shot you. They'd have no reason to lie, so we've come back to you.
You haven't been telling the truth, have you?
Why should I do anything else?
What about this car that drove away?
I didn't see any car. I don't know anything about it.
Now, look, you've been evasive about this from the beginning. You told me you couldn't remember, but you had time to think before Dollar got here. And you gave him the story about this man.
We think you're protecting whoever shot you, Boldrick.
That's crazy.
We want you to tell us who it was.
I can't tell you. I don't know.
You won't tell us who was in the car?
Leave me alone.
All right, Boldrick. If you want to protect whoever tried to kill you, I guess it's your business. But we'll learn who it was.
Wait a minute. I deserve to get it. That don't make any difference to you, but it does to me. I don't want to hurt anybody anymore. That's why I won't tell you.
Now, take it easy, Boldrick.
There was only one way to stop me from hurting people.
What were you doing?
My ex-wife.
You were still seeing her?
I guess there was only one way to stop me. I was hurting her husband, my wife, and my friend.
Was her husband in the car, Boldrick?
I think we better call the doctor.
Was her husband in the car?
Yes, but I don't want to hurt him anymore.
Maybe we shouldn't have questioned him, huh? I'll call Dr. Karp.
We will return you to the second act of yours truly, Johnny Dollar, in just a moment. Johnny Dollar's listening fans will want to make a special note of Johnny's time change, beginning this coming Wednesday, June 20th, over most of these same CBS stations. Follow yours truly, Johnny Dollar, on his San Francisco search for a missing medico, a puzzling case Johnny calls the Malcolm Wish matter. Enjoy it when you hear yours truly, Johnny Dollar, moving to Wednesday nights on CBS, starting on the 20th, next Wednesday. And now with our star, Edmund O'Brien, we return you to the second act of yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
With Arthur Boldrick nearing the point of death, the next move was obvious. To bring in the man he had accused and arrange a formal identification and accusation. Sergeant Wright called 2 other officers to stand by the hospital and, in case we were too slow, get a deathbed statement. Then Wright and I left. The dying man's first wife, Anna, had married a man named Thomas Hood. We found their house in the slightly more desirable neighborhood, but not too far from where the Boldricks lived.
Yes?
Are you Mrs. Hood?
Yes.
Here you are. Here you are. Police. Is your husband at home?
No, he's out of town. What's the matter?
I think we'd better come in and talk to you then.
What do you want with me?
We want to talk to you about Arthur Boldrick.
What did he do?
He was shot this afternoon. Now, may we come in?
All right.
This is Mr. Dollar. He's a private investigator.
Mrs. Hood?
Art is dead.
No, but he's not expected to live.
Why did you come here?
We just left Boldrick a short time ago. He told us your husband shot him.
Oh, no. No, he didn't.
You said your husband was out of the city, Mrs. Hood. When did he leave?
This afternoon.
Why did he leave?
He went on business. He's a salesman. He's out of town. He couldn't have shot him.
What time did he leave?
It was this afternoon. I think about 4 or so.
He left this house about 4?
I think that's when it was.
Boldrick was shot a little after 5:30, between then and 5:45.
Is your husband's car a sedan or a coupe or what?
Oh, sedan.
What color?
Tan.
A sedan driven by a man and described as brown or tan was seen leaving the alley near where Boldrick was shot.
Huh?
It was seen a few seconds after the shots were heard.
No. No, he didn't do it.
I'd better sit down, Mrs. Hood. Come on, sit down.
He didn't shoot him. I swear he didn't. I swear.
You mean he approved of your saying Boldrick?
He did. Who told you that?
Boldrick.
My husband didn't know. I know I was wrong. I shouldn't have seen him. That doesn't make any difference. Except my seeing him didn't have anything to do with whatever happened. Tom didn't shoot him because he didn't know about it. And he mustn't know. He mustn't find out.
In spite of what you thought, it looks like he did know. Now, where is he, Mrs. Hood? We want to reach him tonight.
I won't tell you. He didn't have anything to do with it. And I can't let him find out about Art and me.
Mrs. Hood, according to the doctors, Boldrick won't live through the night. This is going to turn into a murder case. What we say to your husband about you isn't important in the least. Very few things are when it's murder.
He didn't know. He didn't have anything to do with it.
When do you expect to hear from him?
I don't know. Sometimes he phones, but never the first day out. Usually to say he'd have to stay out longer than he expected to.
We'll have to have more than that. We'll get in touch with his company.
I wish you'd listen to me once more. I tell you, Tom didn't do it. If you talk to him, all you're going to do is bust up our lives. That's all you're going to do.
Then I guess that's what we'll have to do. You ready to go, Dollar?
By the time we got back to the hospital, Arthur Boldrick was dead. He had made a deathbed statement, and the gang had named Thomas Hood as the man who had shot him. While Sergeant Wright went to work on locating him, I stopped by the Boldrick house. It was the next-door neighbor, Will Wheeler, who...
I got a lot of drinks down there, and she finally went to sleep. I don't know what kind of shape she'd be in if you woke her up.
I won't bother her then. Her husband died about an hour ago.
Oh. Well, I sort of knew, I guess, after I talked to you this afternoon. Poor old Art. Sure going to miss him. He had a lot of faults. Everybody knew about those, I guess, but there were a lot of good things about him, too. Hardly anybody knew about them. Was there any more on the guy that killed him?
He changed his story. He finally told us Tom Hood had shot him.
Tom Hood? Anna's husband?
Yeah.
Well, I don't get it.
What?
Well, he's holding to one story and then changing it.
The first one didn't hold up. The police could find plenty of people who would have seen a man running away, but nobody that did. But a woman saw a car that checked with the one Hood drives. I guess you knew about Boldrick and his ex-wife.
Yeah, I still don't see why he told the first story and then changed it.
I don't either. He said he deserved to get shot, that he'd hurt a lot of people, and there was no other way to stop him. He said he didn't want to hurt Hood anymore.
And that's why he didn't say it was him. That's what I mean about the bad side of him and the good side.
Did his wife know about Anna?
I'm not sure. Cinch, I never talked to her. Oh, you think he told that first story to keep her from finding out?
It could be. The police will call her in the morning. When she hears about it, tell her there are some insurance papers for her to sign, will you? I'll leave them now. next morning, when I phoned Sergeant Wright at 10, things stood pretty much the same. Thomas Hood hadn't been located. He supposedly had left for Boston, where he was expected to check into the Royce Hotel, but he never reached there. The Massachusetts police were alerted, and we were sure that part of it was covered. I got to Wright's office at 10:45, and at 11:30, we were thrown a curve.
My name is Mandel. I read in the paper this morning about the shooting out north yesterday.
Well?
My friend said I was a fool for coming in to see you, but I work on radio repairs, and I delivered a set to some people in the next block that afternoon.
What time did you deliver it, Mr. Mandel?
About 5:30, a little after. I read how some woman saw a tan sedan going down that alley, and you were looking for it. Well, I'm pretty sure that was mine.
You drove through the alley?
Yeah, I did.
You're sure of the time?
You can ask the people who own the set. Their name is Olston in the next block.
And you followed the alley through the next block?
Yes, I did. The same way that dame said.
Did you hear the shots?
No, but I think I know why. That alley is bumpy, and I got a few loose bolts in that car. It's pretty noisy. But the car that dame spotted was mine. I'm sure of that.
Well, thanks, Mr. Mandel. That's very interesting information.
It was interesting, especially in the face of Boldrick's deathbed statement. As far as we could see, Mr. Mandel had no reason to lie. Sergeant Wright and I went back over everything we had. When we'd finished, there were only a few points from which to start the investigation again. This is Sergeant Wright, Mr. Wheeler. I don't believe you've met.
How do you do?
I do.
We hope Mrs. Boldrick is able to see us.
Yeah, I think she's in pretty good shape. What, is anything new developed?
Well, we think so, Mr. Wheeler. Where's Mrs. Boldrick?
She's here, in this room. I want to talk to you, Velma. This here is Sergeant...
Sergeant Wright.
How do you do?
Hello, Mrs. Boldrick. We want to cover this as quickly as possible. You know that your husband accused Thomas Hood of shooting him?
Will told me.
It was an... Do you believe it?
Said so.
You knew about him and his ex-wife?
No. Not till Will told me about what he said when he was dying.
You're sure of that?
He never talked about Anna.
Well, in spite of the fact that your husband accused Hood right up to the time he died, it looks like Hood didn't shoot him.
Why would he say it?
Must have been that he was trying to protect someone. But if you didn't know about him and Anna, he couldn't have been protecting you, because you wouldn't have had any reason to kill your husband.
So, who do you think he was protecting, Mrs. Boldrick?
I don't know.
Wait a minute. Art told so many stories. I don't get it.
The last one depended on a car. I told you about it. But it turned out not to be the one that Hood drove.
What was the matter with it?
Well, it looks like he was just trying too hard.
Only one or two people could have really seen whoever killed Boldrick. We've covered the alley both ways. We've covered the houses across the alley where the killer could have slipped through. This house and yours, Wheeler, are the only ones we didn't bother to check.
I can't do any more, Will.
Wait a minute.
What's the matter?
I can't do any more.
All right. I'm all right. All right.
It wasn't my idea. I went as far as I could. It was his idea.
Was it you he was protecting, Mrs. Boldrick?
It wasn't her fault. I mean, anyone would have done it. He's over too far.
Because of Anna.
Because of Anna. Yes, whatever. She's as much to blame. I couldn't stay away from her, but she could have made him, and yesterday, with her husband out of town, it reached a peak. We all knew it would someday.
You seem to know quite a bit about it, Wheeler.
Yeah. I'm in it, too. I lied along with Art and Velma.
It's not Will's fault. He did it because he was a friend. He didn't lie. He just... I killed Art. That's what's important, isn't it?
Yes, it is, Mrs. Boldrick.
He was going to see her. He even told me. And I couldn't help what I did. I followed him out and shot him. But I'm sorry. I'm sorry I killed him.
Expense account item 2, miscellaneous, $75. Expense account total, $77.30. Remarks? According to precedent, Mrs. Boldrick will probably get one of those widow's specials, from 3 to 20 on second-degree murder. That should have her out of prison in a little over 2 years. So the company has that length of time
to figure out ways and means to avoid payment of her claim. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Beginning next week, yours truly, Johnny Dollar, will be heard on Wednesday at 9 o'clock Eastern Daylight Saving Time. Consult your papers for the time change in your area. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, stars Edmund O'Brien in the title role and is written by Gil Dowd with music by Wilbur Hatch. Edmund O'Brien can soon be seen in the Paramount Pictures production, Warpath. Featured in tonight's cast were Edgar Barrier, Parley Bear, Jeanette Nolan, John McIntyre, Wally Mayer, Virginia Gregg, Gene Bates, and Harry Lang. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, is transcribed in Hollywood by Jaime Del Valle. This is Dick Cutting inviting you to join us next Wednesday at 9 o'clock Eastern Daylight Saving Time when Edmund O'Brien returns as
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Here is a really novel crime-busting switch. Instead of chercher la femme, it takes a femme to do the detective work on tonight's action-packed Gangbusters Manhunt on most of these same CBS stations. In this fast-paced Gangbusters chase, it takes a lady detective to trap a shrewd safe-cracking trio when her male counterparts fail to get the evidence. And now, stay tuned for 5 minutes of the latest news. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.